All right, thanks everybody for coming out this early. So this is work by Aske and I, where we looked at a whole bunch of Cite papers to find out what happens there, how do people actually write. So it was motivated by kind of us noticing that there's a whole bunch of advice by people out there in the community that they provide their personal opinion on how we should be writing Cite papers, like what are good things we should be doing, what are things we should be avoiding. But of course the big problem with that is it's always like personal opinions, and it's very hard to get a grasp of how people actually do write Cite, because there's just too many Cite papers. So everybody personally probably has only read a small subset of our Cite papers. So we kind of thought, okay, maybe we can do something about this. And instead of kind of going by personal opinion or feel, we just kind of thought, okay, let's collect a whole bunch of data and have a look. And a lot of that might look familiar to the talk just happening before, but this is a very similar thing. But we also collected the PDFs of all Cite papers, actually, though. And this was part of a larger project. So I encourage you to go to see this other talk on what do we mean by interaction analysis of 35 years of Cite. It's going to happen at Cite next year. And you can already put that in your calendars if you like the data that we're going to show you today. Next year, go to that talk. But we supplemented that with citation statistics. First, we were kind of curious, okay, we can take the text and we can find out how people write, but maybe we can also relate that back to how people receive the paper. And of course, citation statistics is not the perfect way to do that, but at least it gives us something to work with. And we scraped Google Scholar October last year, so obviously some papers from like Cite 2018 might have been cited a bit more after that, but it's a snapshot essentially. All right, so let's get started, look at some data. But I want to preface this with a big warning because I'm going to show you lots of bar graphs where like this one is a bit higher than the other, and there's going to be some regression that I'm going to show you. And it's very tempting to then say, oh, if I put a comma in my title, then obviously all of a sudden my paper is going to be cited much more. And obviously that it doesn't quite work like that. So we're going to show lots of correlations, and I just want to warn you not to jump the shark. I'm saying like that, so kind of don't read too much into that. So maybe there's something, but we don't prove any of that. Just as a warning, I want to make that very clear. All right, but let's look at data. And we have data on 6,578 Cite papers. So here's an example of what we have. So there's like a big field of text and then a title, and then we have the year, of course, citation. I have a few more. So if you plot that, and you can kind of see that, well, up to 2005, there really weren't that many Cite papers. So there's really only after 2005, or the majority of our data set is papers after 2005. And you can kind of see Cite 2011 in Vancouver, where they just were very accepting this one year. Right? And of course we also have citation data, so we can look at the most cited papers. So it's like one heuristic evaluation of user interfaces from 1990 has been cited more than 6,000 times. And unfortunately most of us authors at Cite are not getting that kind of number, so we also looked at the lower end. And for example, if you look at Cite papers that we have received 10 or fewer citations, it's actually 30% of all Cite papers, right? And we can go a bit more extreme if you look at like how many Cite papers were never cited, and that's 363 Cite papers, like 5.5% at Cite never been cited per October last year. And the cutoff is somewhere like, I think around 26 or something. Yeah, so about like 50% of Cite papers, 26 or fewer citations. So there's quite a bit of a split, but there's a few other views we have of that. So if we just plot number of citations over the years, you're going to see, oh, okay, earlier papers did better, later papers did a bit worse. Of course, that's total number of citations, so it's going to be a bit distorted in that if your paper was published in 1985, you've had quite a few more years to get cited. So of course, we need to normalize that. This is like, it's not just year, it's actually like when it was published. So papers published last year actually had a bit of a chance over a few months to get cited. But we still see a similar pattern, where there's like a sweet spot of papers that just seem to be received quite well, and then the early work not performing that well, and then the later work, for some reason, also not performing quite well. We don't really know why that is the case, but it's an interesting thing that we did not expect to see in the data, and probably something to look into. So as Cite is growing, we don't seem to be cited in the same rate of growth as we are getting papers out. Another thing that we're really interested in is the readability of papers. So that's one of the other measures we have for all the papers. And we use this Untitled readability formula, which basically does something like the complexity of a sentence, how long is it, do you have complicated words. So there's two examples here, right? Like a simple version and a complex version of a sentence. And you can see that readability is 6 in the former case, in the first case, and 16 in the latter. So a higher number means less readable, which is a bit counterintuitive. And you can kind of in your head, there's a transformational scale for that, so you can in some way take the number and make it a grade level. But it's a bit fuzzy. But like the average Chi paper sits at around 9th grade level. So we're not writing like too complex, but something that we found really curious is that over time Chi papers have become more readable. Remember, like lower number actually means more readable. And that's odd. So people have done this kind of analysis in other fields, in biology for example, and the usual progress is that stuff gets more complicated over time. That a field creates a whole bunch of new terminology, that we have words that we really only use inside the field, and we don't seem to do that. Or we have so many new people coming in that fall back to talking about more broad kind of things, but we don't seem to be on a path where we develop like an insider lingo or new complex words to describe like complicated constructs, which I guess is nice because it kind of ensures that our work actually is readable by a larger audience. But there's something a bit odd about that, and maybe that's kind of something to think about, what that means for the community. And of course, we have citation numbers, we have readability numbers, so we put that all together. I mean, look, does it actually matter? Yeah, I mean, probably not that much. There seems to be a bit of a sweet spot, but I would be careful of drawing some big conclusions from this. But clearly you don't want to be completely unreadable, and you don't want to be completely simplistic, but I'm sure you don't even need to tell that. All right, so that's the overall like properties we computed for all the papers, but of course we want to look a little deeper in like the writing of those Chi papers and what's in there. So the first thing I want to start with is titles, just because titles also is something that has gathered lots of traction in the community. So there's like blog posts, like more or less official blog posts that tell us we should all put a colon on our title. And there's general advice of like things should be catchy. And of course, it's really hard to test for catchy, so we're not going to do that. But I mean, a colon in the title, of course, that we can do, and we can do a few other things. So first of all, we looked at just the length of titles. And we seem to be, as we progress in time, I guess all the good titles are already taken, so we need to add more and more words to our titles. I think the shortest Chi title has 5 characters, and you can kind of see in this distribution of title length that's a drastic outlier. Like nobody does 5-character titles anymore. Maybe, I mean, with the challenge for you, like try to get a 4-character title published next year. That would be quite fun. And you can kind of see it's a multimodal distribution because people really don't want to have like one word on extra line. It's our assumption, so they kind of squeeze the title so it fits the template. But we didn't confirm that. That's just like something we're assuming is happening. What do people use? All the obvious stuff. Of course, there's design and interaction and designing. Like this, maybe it's like filler. Maybe the question will be, do we really need to have that on our titles? But that's what people do. And well, now the big question, does it matter? So we tested a whole bunch of characters you can put in titles. And colon, yeah, maybe. But I would say, I think the jury is still out on that one. And I guess it can't hurt. The biggest one we found was like putting a comma in the title. I mean, again, I'm not saying put a comma in the title and magically your paper is going to take off much more. Maybe there's some other thing happening, right? Like if you have a whole list of things you're doing in your title, maybe that's good. What you shouldn't put, maybe a semicolon. That just seems to confuse people. Maybe, again, I'm not saying that's... So there's, but I would say that it's not a very clear pattern. So I mean, just like this general advice of putting a colon, everything is going to turn out all right. I would be cautious about that. And of course, we also looked at specific words. So here we have mobile, and basically nobody publishes paper on mobile in the title before the year 2000. Then it kind of takes off. And at this point, does anybody have a word I should enter here? We can make this a bit of interactive. Facebook. Okay, let's see. Hoping this runs sufficiently fast because sometimes the whole notebook thing is a bit of a mess. All right, I mean, same pattern, I guess, right? Nobody publishes Facebook papers early on, and Facebook papers apparently are quite well received. So, I mean, again, I'm showing you a lot of those plots here, and all our plots, I should mention that, they do show confidence intervals, bootstrapped. But of course, there's a whole lot of them. So if you do any kind of comparison for this presentation, for multiple comparison, any correction for that, any difference probably disappears quite a bit. So we have a whole bunch of those words that kind of just creep in a bit later, and then there's some that have quite sustained use. So if I were putting, I put design here, we get a very different pattern where it's just something we always have used, and I guess are going to continue to be using. All right, that's titles, but let's actually look at paper content. For paper content, there's also quite a bit of advice people have out there. So every year there's a guide for a successful submission that the Cite is on their website, where we are asked to write in clarity and conciseness, and for example, to avoid puns or colloquialisms. And again, it's really hard for us to find puns, but long and complex sentences, yeah, I mean, that's something we can do. I'm going to look at paper length first, just an overview, and you can kind of see as our paper titles have gotten longer, our papers have also just gotten quite a bit longer over the years. You can kind of see the year that references started not to count, quite a bit of a jump. But in general, like if you look at Cite papers from the 80s, they're drastically different than Cite papers today. So the average Cite paper in the 80s is about a short paper today. So we just seem to add much more stuff to our papers today, and you know, I mean, I'm hoping that it doesn't continue like that. So I put a linear regression, but let's hope that it kind of like flattens out at some point. All right, let's look at sentences, because clearly the guide says we should write short sentences, and it's not what we're doing. Sentences actually seem to be getting longer, which is, I mean, again, it's very noisy, but there seems to be a trend at least that we just pile more and more stuff in one sentence, which is against the official guidelines. I guess nobody actually reads those, but all right. And of course, we did the check, and I guess, I mean, as you would expect, if you write one sentence, of course, your readability goes down, because that's the very thing readability tests actually check for. Whether you get cited more or less, I don't think there's much happening there. So actually, like from an impact perspective, you can write whatever you want. All right, we also looked at content. So one thing that I found super curious, like just looking at language, so we sent all those papers to a spell checker and like looked where were the fewest errors reported. And basically Kai is just, it's 85% American English. And in some weird way, those papers seem to be doing better. So I'm sure there must be some kind of geographical pattern where like people in North America or all around the world do different things than people in the UK. That's an interesting follow-up paper for somebody to do. Like, what is it about UK research that is kind of slightly different kind of interest than other people? But I thought it was kind of curious. And another thing we were kind of interested in is like how people talk about novelty, because it's also something where you might think there always needs to be something novel. And indeed, every paper has some kind of new something in there. It's like continuously over 90%. But at some point, I guess people decided that new is not enough. There needs to be something novel as well. So you see a big rise in that basically after the year 2000. And I'm assuming, as with the one I showed you earlier, it's probably not going to continue like that forever. All right, so we can look at that a bit. Okay, this is either imperfect or imperfect. But okay, this is, again, I can show you novel and how that increased over time. And I can put different words here. So for example, if I can do something like subtle, if I spell it correctly. And we can kind of see that, this one takes a bit longer. And you can kind of see subtle, also something that's on the rise. You know better. Anybody else have a word I should put in here?
Significant. Yeah.
Significant. Okay. But that will also cover not significant, of course, right? So it's not. But I guess there is more significant over time. And we also, maybe we want to compare them. So we're like, we kind of a fight between mobile and ubiquitous computing, and ubiquitous seems to win. I guess we can do a bit more of that in the question part at the end. I want to quickly, because we had this nice talk before, so we thought, we should run the same thing, right? Because we have like all the years, so we should just run with the same thing on all the years. So we also tested for p equals or p is smaller, larger. And basically what we find is like in the earliest, nobody reported p-values. Like all those papers from the 80s don't really have statistical results, so it doesn't distort it that much. But we also looked at comparing that with citation data. And actually, if you do non-dichotomous, I would say there's probably no difference between the two. But if you ignore any kind of error bars and just look at the mean, like let's assume this is bad statistical reporting, I'm submitting that to Kai next year, and you could just go, we should do non-dichotomous. Actually, that seems to be a benefit in doing that. But all right, that's all the things that I kind of pre-prepared. I guess, just prepared. I'm happy to enter more stuff that you would like to know about into this text field here and run execute in the question part of this presentation. Thanks.
We've got time for a couple of quick queries into the database.
Can you just try qualitative and quantitative versus the other?
Those are a bit slow because it's a whole bunch of text that actually has to punch through. But let's see. All right, so I would say qualitative wins, but you can also look at the readability of those. I mean, I think that might be. I would expect qualitative to be less readable, but let's see what happens. And again, it's going to take a while again. Sorry, I didn't buy a faster laptop for this presentation. All right, not that much of a difference. Sorry.
I love this. I wonder if there's a way to get a hold of a database of rejected papers and do the same analysis to compare that with the accepted ones. I think that is a worthy line of inquiry.
I think it would be great to have it. And in a way, I think, we had to steal all the data from Google and from the ACM. I think we shouldn't have to do that, right? In a way, there should be some way to make this public. And I'm sure somebody will have the question, but I don't think we can release it, the stuff that we have, because it's just a copyright nightmare. I would just encourage you all to write angry emails to some Cite executive, because there's no reason everybody should be able to plot some stuff into that or search the full text in some way.
Great presentation. Actually, I have done similar kind of work which was published last year in Scientific. We also looked at the best paper awards, and you said there wasn't much difference in the readability, but we found that the best paper awards were less readable as compared to the